Welcome to the Make Your Mark podcast. Hey everyone, I'm Mark Moyer, author of Win Again, speaker, career coach, and business advisor. And I help athletes, executives, and entrepreneurs reach their fullest potential. What you're going to be hearing in every single episode are conversations with athletes and other sports-related influencers. And we'll be offering you the insight that you need to succeed in life, including advice that will let you jump past your competition, whether it be for a great new job or taking your business to a much, much higher level. Make sure to connect with me on social media at Mark Moyer Coach and go to my website, markmoyer.com, to get access to the tips and strategies that my coaching clients get directly. If you're looking for ways to make your mark, send me an email to mark@markmoyer.com and I'll get you going right away. Thanks for joining me today. It's going to be an awesome episode. Now, are you ready to make your mark? Let's do this. Hey everyone, welcome to the Make Your Mark podcast. My name is Mark Moyer and I'm broadcasting to you live from New York City, and I'm super thrilled to have you on board, whether you're here in New York, somewhere else in the United States, or around the world. Thanks for listening. And I'm really excited today because I've got Chris Jackson on board. And Chris is one of these guys who's given back to our country for years. I mean, he's been a member of the U.S. Army. He served overseas. He's been in the police force, doing great work in the state of Ohio. Just a super guy. But now, more importantly, he's taking everything he's learned and all these lessons, and he's helping veterans and others make that transition out of the military and into the civilian world. And it's just, he's doing great stuff. It's a super episode. But before we jump in, make sure you subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, wherever you're listening to this, hit the subscribe button. And go to my website, markmoyer.com, for access to all the previous episodes. They're all great. And also access to some great content that will really help you take your business or your career to the next level. That's part of my coaching, and I love doing it. But before you do all that stuff, really check out this episode. Chris is a great guy. He and I are teaming up on the new Uniform to Suit Masterclass series, where we're both going to be helping out veterans and athletes make that transition from the battlefield and the playing field into civilian world and into the professional world and the business world. And it's all great stuff. So let's do it now. Here's Chris Jackson and myself. You're going to love this episode. Happy listening. Hey, super excited to have Chris Jackson with me today. He is an absolute, I don't know what he is, an absolute stud. He's a great guy, funny guy. I don't want to say handsome guy because he's a Cowboys fan, but we'll go into that in a few minutes. But there's so much to cover today. I'm really excited to have him on board. We're going to cover a whole lot of ground. We're going to talk about Chris Jackson, the guy. We're also going to talk about what he's doing now. And in fact, I'm going to be collaborating with him on a masterclass series that's really designed to give tons of advice and help to veterans, to athletes, to anybody who's been in a different environment or a sport or somewhere they've been on a field and they need to make that transition into business. So lots to cover today, but Chris, thanks for being on board.
It's a pleasure, Mark. Thanks for having me.
Oh, hey man, it's awesome to have you. So first things off, I mean, I like to always talk about a sports component to my podcast, the Make Your Mark podcast, because to me, a lot of times, especially athletes, they have so many different talents and skill sets and capabilities that they've developed as an athlete that they bring to whatever they're doing. And I think you'll find that the majority of even the veterans, the people who serve, had some sort of athletics in their background. It gives them that competitive spirit that makes them want to give and sort of to contribute on the field, right? So, So let's talk about just briefly, when you were growing up, tell me a little bit about your sports background and what kind of sports did you play and, what'd you do going into high school and that sort of thing?
I actually was a big baseball player. Loved the sport, played it all the way from T-ball. And actually, I would say 1 year after high school.
Okay.
And then I was also a football player and I also wrestled. Now, I know you're going to make jokes about the wrestling, but that's fine. But no, honestly, I played 3 sports and baseball was my go-to. Okay. And after that, yeah.
So as a baseball player, what was your position? What were you playing?
I mainly pitched through high school. Well, no, let me back up a little bit. Probably around Pony League is when I started pitching. It wasn't until Pony League that I pitched, but all beforehand, I was actually first base. I played first base. And then once I got into, not college, high school, my coach, he's like, first base is for the bigger guys. You got speed. You need to either pitch or go in the outfield. So I ended up playing left field and pitcher.
Oh, cool. So you played through high school, played sports, and then what was it that, that day that you sort of woke up and said, you know what, I feel like I need to serve. I want to get into the service. What triggered that, or was it something that built up? What happened?
It was my senior year when 9/11 hit, 2001, and around that time, we were sitting in class. And then all of a sudden, all the teachers started bringing up the TVs and putting that on, and we were all like shocked. Like, is this really happening to our country? We were dismissed, went home early, and I turned on the TV, started watching it some more, and I was like, this is not good. I can't believe anyone has the audacity to actually do this to our country.
Right.
And January hit, and I was of age. I spoke to my mother, and she wouldn't say she gave me her blessing, but she did. And she's like, you can do whatever you want. You're 18, and I actually chose to go into the military.
Okay, great. And so you jump into the service, and what was your first experience? I mean, where was boot camp, and what was that whole process like to you as an 18-year-old?
Well, I got sent off to Fort Knox, Kentucky.
Okay.
And the School of Hard Knocks is what they call it. Yeah. And I spent 9 weeks there, actually 10 weeks. And once that was done, we get shipped off to AIT. And that's where I spent another, I think, 12 weeks into AIT, which is Advanced Initial Training. And that's where you become, your skill set or your primary MOS. That's where you start to develop that set of skills for that MOS that you chose or you got selected for. Not always do we get to go into the job that we want, our recruiter or the availability, whatever it is. If certain circumstances, we don't always get to choose. But anyways, you get into that primary MOS, and once you're complete with that, then you get sent to your unit. In my case, I actually enlisted to the National Guard. I still call it the Army, but you know what? It is what it is. But no, I did that for the sake that when I made that decision, I still wanted to go to college for baseball, but I also wanted to serve my country. Unfortunately, I got sent overseas quickly after my training or that initial training.
Got it. And so you get sent overseas, any specific, like I'm assuming it was a nice tropical location, right?
Oh yeah, the weather was nice. It was very hot every single day, and it hardly ever snowed.
Hardly ever snowed. That's right. You had a chance to work on your tan. So where was that? Yeah. Where was that first stop?
Well, actually, we started off in New Jersey, and we was one of the longest units there in New Jersey. We were there almost 3 months. A lot of logistical problems and everything, but then we got sent. We flew over to Kuwait, and that was our first stop. And from Kuwait, we convoyed up to the north and got into Iraq. Got it.
And did you find that, because it's interesting that we, a lot of us civilians, we sort of absorb what we see on the news and what we see on TV, and also it really depends on what channel you watch these days, right? As to what kind of news you get. But
right.
As you're part of this convoy heading north and into Iraq, did you feel that, the folks there, the civilians in Iraq were happy to see you? Were they thinking, here are these guys that are going to help us, get rid of this other guy? Or, what did you feel the general mood was?
To be honest, it was 50-50. There were some people that waved to us, and then others gave us that hillbilly wave and that sign.
Got it.
And I reflect back on the day we actually crossed in from Kuwait and exactly into Iraq. If you've ever watched a Mad Max movie, the skies went from being clear, and Kuwait, it does have a paradise look to it. It's clean. And then as soon as we crossed into Iraq, there was a gate. And it was literally, it seemed like the gates fell. And that's when the dust started, forming. There was trash everywhere. It got really cloudy, hazy. And you were like, oh, wow, am I in Mad Max, 5, whatever. But it was seriously like a Mad Max movie. It just changed just like that, right in the border.
Well, and so, I think what people sometimes don't necessarily appreciate is that, when you're in conflict and you're in a war zone, and you've got to really be worried about not just the bullets that are flying or the mortar shells that are landing conceptually, but you just also don't know which of the civilians are really, who might actually attack you or who might not. The conditions themselves also are, they're super challenging. You've got the heat, you've got the dust everywhere. I'm assuming it did a number on all the weaponry, right? You had to constantly be cleaning that. And it just, these are really challenging conditions. It wasn't hanging out on the beach of wherever it was. This was tough stuff. And, I think that sometimes, when civilians hear about people that served overseas, it's something where we can't possibly understand it. If I walked outside of my apartment here in New York City and it was 108 degrees and the wind was howling and there was dust everywhere, I'd be like, whoa, how could I even do anything in this? But you were living that, like that was your everyday, and that's how you had to learn to adapt to that. So you spent all this time in Iraq, and then, but just give me a sense of some of the stuff that you saw that maybe surprised you, that like caught you didn't expect necessarily.
The living conditions was one of the things. The people and the way they lived, they don't have ordinary homes. The streets, they're just, it's almost like downtown Miami or New York per se, but just desert everywhere and trash everywhere. And that's one of the things that I would say that was a culture shock, was just how they live. And you look at what we have here, and it is paradise compared to over there. And some of the things that you used to take for granted before you've seen all that, it changes you. And then just our living conditions and how we had to adapt and live like that for the tour. That was took some getting used to, but you adapted. That's what, one of the biggest things that we're good at is adapting in such variables.
Look. And I'm hoping that people still thank you for all the time and the service that you spent, not just there, but overall in the military. But so then, you come back home, you still spend some time in the service, but then it's time for you to consider your options post-service, right? And, one of the things that we've talked about is, what are some of the resources that the military offers for those who are looking to transition out. And that is a bit of a concern because, part of what they try to do is keep you in, right? They think you're good at what you're doing, why not stay? And they offer incentives and so forth to stay, right? But what did you experience yourself in terms of being able to prepare for the day after you leave, day one civilian life?
And it's still an issue. It's getting better. But when we got back, we flew it back into New Jersey, and all that post-mob stuff, mobilization, they set you down in large groups, and they have people that come in front of you and they ask you if there's any issues or that you want to talk about. Well, the only thing that you're concerned about is going home. You spent a year in Iraq. All you are concerned about is I want to see my family. So those perimeters you don't even think about. You just want to get home and get settled in. But the after effects many years later, even a couple of days, weeks, whatever go by, and then you start saying, okay, now that I'm settled back home, what do I do next? And for the resources, when I was in, there weren't a lot. You look to the VA, but that's all self-directed. If you really want to approach that, then you do, but it's not a must. There's not a checklist that I guess there is a checklist, but it's not a mandatory checklist that you have to abide by and proceed to the steps of, okay, this is the after active process. It's just,
Right.
hey, is there anything you want to talk about? No. And you don't want to share that with people that don't understand. Your buddies beside you, yes, but once you get back, there's limited resources, honestly. Yeah.
So you transition out, and you've got some ideas of things you want to do. But what was the first thing that caught your attention? You've been out for a little. How much? Well, let me take a step back. How much time were you out before you started to think, well, I better get my act together. I better start getting a job and start earning some money again, that sort of thing.
It was right away. I mean, I would say I took 3 or 4 months off, maybe a half a year. But then after that, I'm just not the type of person to sit back and not do anything. So I started searching for jobs and whatnot, and I found out that a lot of them. And I was still fairly young. I was 21 years old and trying to get a job. And when I was used to being on the battlefield or being a soldier, I didn't know how to be a civilian. And it changes you quickly. I mean, that 1 year turns you into a man and like no other. So it was
Right.
really a stressful situation in itself. But I just started finding certain things that I did while I was overseas, and driving a truck was one of them. So I got into the trucking industry.
Okay. And so when you say you got into the trucking industry, you said, well, geez, I really learned to become really comfortable around trucks. That was sort of a lot of what you were specialized in, and on the mechanic side, but also driving them. And I'm assuming you drove some big badass trucks when you were overseas. Probably some that wouldn't really be street legal here in the States, I guess, right? Okay.
Right.
Not
Oh, yeah.
specific. I mean, take one of those through the streets of wherever, Miami or New York. That'd be pretty funny. But so what got you into trucking? I mean, how did you start doing that, and then what did that lead to?
I drove one of the trucks overseas. They call it in the military is a 5-ton. It's a tractor trailer, just as you see out on the street, the semi or whatever you want to call it, big truck. In the civilian life, I drove one of those overseas, and every time the commander or the platoon sergeant, whoever needed something moved or backed up, guess who they called? It was like, hey, for some reason, Jackson can back a tractor trailer up. Let's call him. So I took that skill and applied it to the civilian life. You don't have to have any degree to drive a truck. There's no university style training that you need. It's just a matter of skill set, whether or not you can drive or not. And the money is actually fairly decent. So to not have a degree and to be able to make that kind of money, it's pretty easy life. So that's the route I took.
And so you went with an actual trucking company, and then, I mean, what are some of the lessons learned from? I mean, we talked about this earlier, but you went to this trucking company, and then you said, "Wait a second." Go ahead.
Right. Yeah. I started driving for a couple. Actually, he became a friend. I drove for him for a while, and then I went on to find a closer job where I didn't have to actually drive to get to the truck, and I started seeing the numbers. I started seeing my percentage compared to what he was making, and I was like, "Oh wow, wait a minute, let me look into this." So I ended up buying the truck that I was driving off of the owner, and I became an owner operator. And for about 5 years, I drove my own truck, and then I kind of tried to scale up, and yeah.
Well, so because look, part of what we're talking about here, Chris, is really making sure that all the lessons that you've learned, and we're going to talk about a few other things going forward. We can really hopefully save a lot of time and effort and money and resources that maybe other veterans and other athletes and other people that are listening to this podcast, they can avoid some of the pitfalls that you've gone through. And you looked at the trucking industry and you said, wait a second, if this guy's making this much off of me and I'm making only this, well, if I own my own truck, then I'll get 100% of this. But then you find quickly that 100% is not really 100%, or it's 100% of a lot less than you thought it was, right? So tell me more about how that, what ended up happening with that sort of operation, and what did it lead to? I mean, what we're going to talk about you becoming a deputy in the sheriff's office in Ohio, and then becoming a law enforcement officer. But tell me more about that transition from the trucking and where you said, wait a second, and then into that.
I got into the numbers, and that's the first thing I saw was just 70% what he was making, and then I was making 30%. But I didn't take into consideration all the variables and all the expenses and whatnot, and the stress. So, I hear a lot of soldiers or a lot of military guys get out. And that's one of the most common jobs to get into is the trucking industry. And a lot of guys ask me, I think I was around 22, maybe 23 at the time when I bought the truck, and I was one of the youngest ones out there on the roads. And then when we would tell trucker stories, it was like, oh, you own your own truck, and I was like, yeah. But about a year, maybe two into it, that's when fuel prices went up, the pay went down, and I wasn't ready for that. I didn't take in my skill set that adapts, and I missed that part. Nor did I take into the strategy of planning ahead and thinking of all my risk involved. And I was ignorant at the time. I got into it just seeing the false profits and was like, oh wow, this is a lot of money. But I didn't look into the actual necessities of running a business. And that's one of the biggest things is treat everything that you get into like a business and strategy, plan and set up a strategy and enter in and exit. And so for the guys out there, if you're looking to get into the trucking industry, definitely look into the numbers. The truck that I had ran at 50 cents a mile. So that right there was, if I made $1 a mile, there was 50% of the profits gone already.
Right. And so you, at what point did you finally decide, look, you know what, this ain't for me, I'm moving on to something else?
It was probably 6 or 7 years later. I just got into that mindset. Like I didn't feel like I was fulfilling my need to give back anyway. You get into the military and you're serving your nation. So I didn't really feel that with the trucking industry. I mean, that kind of lifestyle, I was lonely. You're out there by yourself, and it's just not a lifestyle that I wanted to be into anymore. So I really sat back and thought what I wanted to do. And that's when I decided I wanted to get back, or I wanted to get in law enforcement. I wanted to get back into something that helps people. So it was probably about 7 years I made that decision.
So you end up becoming a deputy in the sheriff's office. Give me a sense of some of the work that you were doing as a deputy there, and we were talking about this earlier, that people watch a lot of stuff on TV, and that's not always everything that really actually happens and that sort of stuff. But give me a sense of some of the stuff that you ended up seeing as in part of your job, and are there any? Well, let me just start with that. Like, give me an idea of a couple of the things that you saw that was just pretty far out there that really caught you by surprise.
I have a lot of stories. I don't know if we have enough time, but you see a lot of crazy things being a law enforcement officer, and a lot of people will say, just say cop. And I will say cop because it's community-oriented policing is where that comes from. But a lot of people say cop in a negative way. There's other words that they like to use, but anyways, it is exciting. It's probably 90% paperwork and 10% action. A lot of people, and we got told this into the academy, and if you got into this job for the action, be prepared to do a lot of paperwork and see very little action. And that is true in some of the places that you live. But if you're getting into law enforcement, you be ready to handwrite or make notes, do all the reports and all that comes with it after you see the action.
Right.
But one of the things that stick out is just the way people live or act, and it can be comical at times, but it's also there's times that I've seen some of the things that were back like the military. My life was in danger, and you got to be ready for that. You got to have that mentality and that character to stand ready and adapt to those situations. So you see a lot out there. I started out into the jail, and then I got put out onto the road. And then my last assignment, I don't want to get into too much, but you and I talked briefly about it. It was something. I mean, I've seen a lot of it was the real world. But yeah.
All right. So you go through that, and it's give our listeners some. I'd love to hear some advice about between coming out of the military and today, you've sort of started a couple of different types of businesses. I think you ran a surplus company for a little while. You've done some other things. What are you mentioned earlier some of your advice about keeping an eye on the bottom line, but other than that, I mean, running a business, it's I think a lot of times people think it's glorified being an entrepreneur. It must mean you can do whatever you want whenever you want. It must be so. And I think people don't realize that, all the time anyway, that there's tremendous hard work that goes on behind the scenes to get to what you're trying to do, to the front facing part of things, right? There's a lot of stuff that goes on behind. And,
Right.
what kind of advice can you give someone coming out of the service or someone coming out of sports that if they want to be an entrepreneur, maybe give me 2 or 3 things that they should keep an eye on. They should really, going into something, what do you think they should get? What kind of advice can you tell someone to get into? What is it that they should do next?
I had issues at first when I started my first business, and it just became more common sense as I went on and I failed. The more times you fail, the more times you learn. So athletes and veterans, I don't want to say we're similar, but in the bigger picture, they have their field and we have our battlefield. So when you get out into the civilian life or for athletes, they get into something other than sports, they need to understand that they possess a leadership skill and a lot of other skills that they don't realize. We go into it thinking that it's all about the battlefield. And then you get out and you're like, well, now if you was a grunt or an infantry guy or whatever, you think that there's nothing out there for me in the civilian life like that. And technically, you have to think that your personality or your characteristics that you obtained while you was in the service or on the field within, the locker room, you was a leader. You have a certain set of traits that you can possess into the business world. And I would say that if you was to get into business, learn how to be a leader, not to just yourself, but other people. You have to provide solutions in business. I got into business and my first thing was surplus. And I thought, okay, well, just because I have a surplus store, sales are going to come. That's not providing a solution. That's providing a sell. And you don't want to be salesy. You want to provide solutions to people, get them to understand you and who you are, tell your story, and carry that into your business culture. So I would say that for veterans, for athletes, you've got a certain set of skills. Really define what your passion is and how you can provide your solution to people.
Got it. That's great advice because, the most solid piece right there is the whole concept of making sure you're providing a solution. You are basically curing their ill, and they may not even know they have that ill, but it's something where you're saying, hey, look, do you ever, struggle trying to figure out what to do next in life, or do you ever really, are you thinking, well, geez, I'm just not happy doing what I'm doing now, but that's just the way it's got to be. And so if you say, well, look, it doesn't have to be that way, and I can teach you how to really take your business from here to here, or I could show you how to be in a job that you really love being in. That's the bottom line, right? Is providing the solution. That's great, Chris. Good stuff. So you decided, a couple of years ago to start Warrior Wealth Solutions, and tell me a little bit briefly of what your vision is for that company, and what is it that you want to offer people. In other words, they go onto your website, which is, by the way, an amazing website. It's beautiful and it's really well done. And I bet that's something how to do, website stuff, right? But give me an idea of, let's say I'm a veteran, or I'm anybody really, an athlete, or just somebody else who's just sort of struggling, not sure what to do next. And I stumble across your website. What is it that what is the kind of the vibe you want to show people, and what are you trying to? What's the goal here?
The goal of Warrior Wealth is just basically to give back to veterans and even athletes. I mean, we all possess that common bond when we get out of our career. We don't know what to do. And I think I developed Warrior Wealth to simply provide a necessity of understanding on how to transition from the battlefield over to business. And that's actually implemented within the slogan, battlefield to business. It's
Right.
teaching veterans on how to take what they've obtained from the military and don't look at it as in, oh, that's my primary MOS. I was an infantryman or, grenadier or whatever the case may be. We take their assets that they've obtained, more of their personal traits, and learn how to convert them over to their career or their business. If they want to take the business route, well, then, we provide simple solutions or the basics of building up a business. If they get into a career and they work for somebody, we tell them to take those certain skills and those same skills that they had in the military or on the field and convert them over to their career and treat it like it's their own business. Because when you do that, you're going to see maximum performance and you're going to increase, positivity and motivation and all that if you treat your job like it's your own business. So
Absolutely.
we help veterans and athletes on transition.
That's great. And, it's interesting. And you and I have talked quite a bit about this. And interestingly, we, as I mentioned at the start, we're going to be doing a masterclass series that really is designed to help veterans and athletes and everybody in between make that transition, because it's something that we feel is in really a strong demand and such a short supply, getting really good, easy to understand tips and strategies that someone can really use immediately to get them to really make that leap. And, there's a whole lot of stuff out there that either you need to, go get a master's degree in, or there's huge books, or, this 26-part series on blah, blah, blah. And it's overwhelming to somebody who just wants some easy things to do that they can get going with right away, right? So It sounds like, look, I know already, because you and I know each other a little bit, that you've got all that expertise and that understanding from the veteran's perspective. I bring it from also a different perspective on the career side, the athlete side and everything. But what's interesting is that once you give someone the confidence that they actually bring a lot to the table, then they're off and running, right? And that to me is the biggest thing holding people back. And so, a veteran, for example, from us civilians, I think we carry so much respect for veterans because they already have built in them that leadership trait that you talk about, the ability to manage and basically forge ahead through adversity, right? The ability to be managed, because right now, especially today, one of the big critiques about some of the, younger generations and so forth is that they may be brilliant, but sometimes they're not great at being managed or managing. And that's something that the military is certainly taught. It's also something that athletes are certainly taught. The whole concept of being coachable, being manageable, that's essential. And also, again, sort of conquering being able to really succeed in the face of adversity. And, there's all kinds of headwinds and side winds and this and that happening day to day when you're running a business, or if you're working for someone or working in a career that has a lot of those headwinds. And to me, the money is on somebody who's been on the field, whether it's the battlefield, the athletic field, someone who's sort of sweat and bled and everything else. That's who I'd love to have on my team. And I think sometimes athletes and veterans who are coming from that perspective, they don't necessarily see that because they haven't seen what it's like to be on the civilian side of things. So to me, it's that's awesome, and that's a lot of what we're going to be talking about. So, Chris, what we're going to be doing is having this masterclass series. It's called, Uniform to Suit. And it's all about whatever uniform you were wearing, whether it's serving our country or a sports uniform, whatever it is, and making that transition into, a business suit. Now, whether you run a business and you don't need to wear a suit, but the whole point is you're now becoming a professional. You're in a business, right? So give me an idea of, what are some of the things that you want to, maybe throw out a couple of things that you'd love to teach. Just almost anybody that's coming out going like, oh my God, now what? What do I do next? Give me a couple more tips and things.
I think one of the things that I'll cover or that we'll discuss together, I think, is self-directed education or investing. You have to invest in yourself because no one else is going to do it for you. We went into the military ourselves. No one forced us. Unless you was drafted, unfortunately, but that hasn't happened in years. But I'm saying that, all of that was we self-invested in ourselves. We go through the service, we go through the sports, and then we get out and we're like, what's going on? And really, you just have to take a step back and take a moment and say, okay, I've done all this myself. Why can't I carry on? So it's basically opening the mindsets of veterans and athletes and saying, you've got it. It's just digging down deep and unleashing, and that's one of the seven steps that I cover is unleash. Each letter is an acronym, or that word is an acronym, and each letter is it's a theory and process that I go through and teach veterans or athletes of how to, go through the process and develop that basically you're just digging down deep and opening up. You've already got the skills, you've acquired them, you just need to learn how to use them now in the civilian world or into your business and career. So that's some of the things we'll be covering. A lot of value, I think, that between me and you both, you're the business side of things, and I've just basically developed a way to teach veterans how to transition. So I think that there's going to be a lot of good stuff coming out of this.
Well, look, one thing I've always been a big fan of is when I listen to any of these sort of webinars and masterclasses and so forth, one thing that I get tired of is the constant, a lot of the people that run these things, they're all about the upsell. They're all about, hey, I'm going to give you just like 10% stuff, and then 90% of it leading towards investing in this my elevated program of blah, blah, blah. And sure, I'd love to have your money. I'd love to have lots of it. But at the end of the day, I get and you get much more of a thrill helping everybody. I mean, that's what we've been doing our whole lives. And it's something that, I feel it's so important when giving a masterclass and doing a program like this, that every single participant gets a huge benefit from and sees the results right away, but not just incremental results, but huge results. And to me, that means, for example, if we can get just one person to see a completely different perspective on what they should be doing with the rest of their career and life, and how if we've impacted just one person, that's amazing, right? And it multiplies from there, right? So to me, Chris, I think what we're going to be doing is really doing our best to make a huge impact on people that don't have that direction. They haven't been able to find any resources yet that truly give them the ability and the power and the motivation and really the knowledge on to succeed and run forward. And you can tell I'm pretty fired up about this. I know you're fired up about it too, right? And we're really excited about doing this because, again, I think for a while we were trying to figure out, well, how can we reach out to the people that are currently providing these resources and give them access to what we know? But the problem is they don't necessarily want, it's almost like they're trying to check a box. And we want to do much more than that, right? Now look, we've covered a whole lot of ground. We've talked about Chris as, the teenager and through the being in the service, starting a business, being involved with trucking, being in law enforcement, trying a couple of businesses that were challenges and so forth. You've given lots of great advice, lots of great sort of ideas and tips, and hopefully I've done some of that too. But now we're hitting the part that I like to call hit your mark, which is a little bit different, and it's more of a quick sort of answer questions and that sort of thing. But I think what I want to hear first is, give me an idea of if you had a chance to, if I told you tomorrow, Chris, this is so-and-so from the blank sports team, and we'd love for you to come play for us, who would it be?
When it comes to baseball, I'm going to stick to the Cincinnati Reds. I was always a Reds fan. So, yeah.
And who was your favorite player back then?
You're going to laugh, but I don't know why he just sticks out. I think that's why he's one of my favorites. It was pretty funny to watch him. It was Rob Dibble when he pitched for the Reds. His pepper, I don't know, but he could throw a ball. That's just
Oh yeah, he was up there, and he was a bad man. I mean, it was
he was serious, and
he sure was. That's great. That's a great call. Cool. Secondly, tell me about when you were in the service, when you were overseas in Iraq. I'm assuming that people did a lot of different things to pass the time because there was probably a whole lot of downtime. But what was? I'm sure there were some people that played a lot of pranks and did funny things. Is there any prank that stands out right now to you that you remember seeing and you were like, oh my God, and let's keep it like more G-rated than X-rated, I guess. But if there was anything that you saw that was really funny that really stands out.
Yeah, I think it was around my birthday time when I turned. I can't remember. It was either my 20th or 21st birthday. We always would give, ass whoopings. And I heard them all rushing down the hallway. Or we basically was on the old Iraqi Air Force base. And it was a big concrete hangar. And you could hear the footsteps run on the concrete. And I locked my door real quick. Well, they didn't care about that. They just ripped the door open. And about 10 guys came in my room and, ushered me out to the hallway and just jumped on me. And I was like, oh, you guys. But, stuff like that, you remember stuff like that because that was a brotherhood that is like no other. I can say law enforcement too, but when you're over in Iraq or over in Afghanistan, you just form some kind of bond that's undescribable. So I would say, we played a lot of pranks on each other, but that moment stuck. I took an ass whooping from 10 guys.
Well, that's just really just so nice of them to do that to you.
Oh,
it's possible you may have returned the favor once or twice.
I did.
But anyway, so, and then if you had a chance today, if I said to you, look, you can have a drink or have dinner with 3 people, dead or alive, doesn't matter. Who would they be? Who are 3 people that you would love to hang out with?
I got to say you first and foremost.
Obviously.
Just
3.5.
no.
3.5.
I would say, really looking at it, Ed Milet. The dude's phenomenal in what he does. And if you don't know who Ed Milet is, I would say just researching, look into what he does. Another one would be, I got to go with Urban Meyer. The guy can coach, and he's a Buckeye. And Albert Einstein, I don't know. The dude was a genius. So maybe him or Henry. Maybe Henry Ford. I would have to say Henry Ford.
Oh, that's interesting. Because I think Einstein would be intimidated by you, right? Well, would he? He'd be like, "Wait a second." You know what? I don't think he was really that smart, honestly. He just did it for a long time. No, I'm kidding.
Right.
Listen, those are great selections. It's funny. I love hearing the different people's answers to this because I get a whole wide variety of people. One of the things that I always wonder is, if you had time to really think about it, I know I put you on the spot with that. Some people, I wonder if they'd sort of come up with, gee, it'd probably be kind of neat to hang out with, I don't know, like Abraham Lincoln or Napoleon or, what's his name, King Tut or something, or,
right.
Some of these, historical figures and what they were really like. But, sometimes people say Oprah and that kind of thing, but I think we all see Oprah and what's going on and everything. So I always wonder what it'd be like to hang out with some of those people that we just don't know a lot about. So like Genghis Khan,
right.
Like, was he always just like this ruthless dude, or did you ever have soft, tender moments when he was, watching, some sort of, or Seinfeld or no, I'm kidding. But anyway, so that's great. Now, in terms of going forward, I mean, give me a sense of, what do you, in the overall scheme of things, Chris, what do you want to do? Like, what do you want to leave? I don't want to say a legacy because it's not like where, you're 85 years old and you're looking back on a long life, but more so like, what do you want to do for people?
Just be able to help them get to know what they really want to do in life. I've struggled with it when a lot of veterans, we have issues when it comes to transitioning, and there's a lot of negativity in the world. And I think just providing some kind of positivity and some kind of reinforcement of saying, hey, you could do this. I don't really expect a whole lot. I just like to help one person at a time. And if I can just help one person a day, I mean, that's great. Or one person a month, whatever the case may be. I just want to help people become successful. And however I do that, that's up to them. We all have our own ways and strategies, but I think that if I just am that guy that says, hey, you can do it. I'm not a Tony Robbins or anything like that, but I just want to be able to help people.
Oh, you're better than Tony. Come on. You know that. Anyway, so look, I mean, at the end of the day, the whole point of my podcast is make your mark, right? And it's all about really putting a spotlight on those people that are making an impact today and are going to continue making an impact and a positive impact. And, Chris, you certainly fall into that that category where I think you're going to be doing some great things for a long, long time. And I'm thrilled to be partnering with you on a few of those things. We're really looking forward to this masterclass series, the Uniform to Suit series. I think that that's going to have an amazing, hopefully uplifting, positive impact on people that really need help making the transition, whatever that transition is. And I think that even though we're sort of tweaking it and gearing it a little bit towards veterans and towards athletes that are leaving their sport, I think that anybody can really use and run with the advice that we're going to be giving people on how to determine what it is that they really want to be doing, what they should be doing. And, look, at the end of the day, we want everybody waking up in the morning excited and fired up to do what they're doing and not saying, oh, crap, it's another day. Right. Yeah. And that's what makes life worth living. Right. So, Chris, I really appreciate your time today. It's been great. You have some great stories, and I'm fired up to be doing this. Uniform to life. Uniform to suit. And it's going to help everyone's life. I got to get that right. Anyway, thanks again for being on, Chris. You're a great guy. I really appreciate your service, both in the military and in law enforcement. And fired up to do this.
Yeah, you too. I appreciate you taking out the time and having me on your show. And like I said, it's going to be pleasurable to work with you.
All right, let's go get them. All right, thanks again.
Sounds good, Mark. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much for joining us today on this episode of Make Your Mark podcast. The goal of the podcast is to help you find ways to make your mark, to succeed in life, and to jump past your competition. Be sure to leave me a review on iTunes and Stitcher, and subscribe to be the first to hear new episodes. If you're looking for ways to make your mark, send me an email, mark@markmoyer.com, and I'll get back to you right away. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time.